This is Reckless Airwaves Radio.
This is Rob from The Rob and Slim Show. Check us out every Wednesday on IPMNation.com/52. You are listening to Reckless Airwaves Radio.
This is Mike Scudero, host of the Yapping Yankees podcast, where I yap about the Yanks and nothing but the Yanks. Anything and everything in the Yankees universe. If you're a Yankee fan, this is the podcast for you. A new episode drops every Sunday night, and you can listen on SoundCloud, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You're listening to Reckless Airwaves Radio.
This is Matt O'Leary from Just Jets, your one-stop shop for all things Jets football. You're listening to Reckless Airwaves Radio.
Hey everyone, this is John Corrigan, host of Corrigan's Corner and the editor of The Wrestling Estate, welcoming you to Reckless Airwaves Radio.
This is Frank Cugino, host of Frank About Sports on YouTube, and you're listening to Reckless Airwaves Radio.
Hello out there. This is Tony Myers, AKA Chainsaw Tony FMW Leather, Leatherface. And you're listening to Reckless Airwaves Radio. Don't touch that dial.
Reckless Airwaves Radio. This is Frankie McDonald. I'm doing great. You're listening to the Reckless Airwaves Radio.
Hey, this is Reckless Airwaves model Valerie, and you're listening to Reckless Airwaves Radio. Uncensored, unfiltered, unforgiving radio. And be sure to check me out on the site at recklessairwaves.com.
Welcome to Reckless Airwaves Radio. Uncensored, unforgiving radio that's always willing to push the limits. We don't care about political correctness. We don't need anyone's approval, and we do what we want. We are ready to wreck the airwaves. This is Reckless Airwaves Radio.
Hey, how you doing, Tony?
Hey, how's it going, man? How you been?
It's going good. How about you?
Well, it's going pretty good. It's, a little hectic because time is winding down and all, but, it's what I expect it to be, like, down to the last minute, photo finish with everything I try to do, so.
Yeah, you're heading back to Japan in, 2 days now? Before we even get to that, though, for anybody who's listening, we're taping this before Tony goes back to Japan. I'm starting my new radio show, Reckless Airwaves Radio, and it starts right after Halloween. So I wanted to get this interview in. We're going to try and figure out a way to do it while Tony's in Japan, but I wanted to still knock this one out just in case. So it'll be out after he's back in Japan, but we'll put that in the notes and everything when we release it. But yeah, as we're speaking now, though, you're like 2 days away, right, from going back?
Actually, I'm leaving tomorrow night. It was revealed like 3 weeks ago. I went into detail about it. I got the news that my father has cancer. So,
sorry to hear that.
When he got wind of me leaving for Japan, he's like, "I'll take it to the airport." And I was like, "I could just call somebody or call an Uber. Like, I don't want to bother you because it was actually he. It wound up turning out that he had an appointment that morning." So I said, the only way it would work is if you drop me off, the night before. And we tried to figure out coordinates and everything. And JFK Airport, like, for him to drive at like 10, 11 o'clock at night to drop me off so I could get on that flight in the morning, it would just be better of me just hanging out in the airport overnight. And it's not like I expect anybody to drop what they're doing and come and hang out with me. But, it's just to make it easier on my dad. 80 years of age. Make everything easier on him, but he insisted when him and my mom found out when exactly I'm leaving. So it's almost too much responsibility to depend on a friend of mine to pick me up on time and not be late. So
right. And definitely best wishes for your father. I know it's a hard time for anybody, at that age. My father is around that age as well, but all this COVID-19 around, and on top of that, cancer. So that's a rough go right there.
Yeah, when I got the news, there's almost a weird blessing in disguise because of all cancers, it's prostate, so that's easily treatable and that kind of thing. So he's been going in for his treatment like 4 days a week. But still, even with the age and everything considered, and the fact that he's my father, I worry.
Oh yeah.
Like anybody else would.
Right.
Cancer is cancer.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Definitely, hope for the best for him, and keep us updated on that for sure. So I'm sure that you're looking excited to be going back to Japan. I know that we've talked about this over the months, and there was always like that little bit of I guess doubt or whatever of when you can go, when you can come back here with all the travel restrictions, but everything is kind of back to normal, I guess, right? At least for now.
Yeah, and the thing was, it too is, when they changed it, I thought it was LaGuardia at first, but it's JFK. When they changed it to JFK, I go, this is what they did twice before. So I was expecting them to, and, I hadn't been going to the gym and routinely working out like I should. And then it was Onita and Onita's girlfriend themselves that had told me, they go, don't be surprised if they get you and have you quarantined in a hotel room for 2 weeks. And I go, well, 2 weeks is a small price to pay, and there's a lot I could do in a hotel room for 2 weeks. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff I'm internally always working on and that kind of thing. And physical-wise, I know I could do calisthenics and, get back into the shape that I want to be in and that kind of thing in those 2 weeks. So it's just, I regret missing any bookings in the meantime, but, with the Japanese government intercepting, there's nothing I could do about it. It's like I told my coworkers, I'd be shocked if everything goes off on 100% because, I'd be shocked if they didn't turn the guy Gene around and send him back home. But,
right.
Work visa, essential and all, it just have to wait and see. There's nothing I could really do but just kind of smile and hope for the best,
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks is nothing, and they're going to be doing that, and they were doing that in the United States on certain states as well, Florida and stuff like that. I think it's lifted now, but you're going to see that a lot this winter all over the world probably as those coronavirus, COVID-19 cases kind of creep up, but that's just the way of the world right now. It's just the way what you got to do.
Yeah, I think we're coming along much further than with things, and people are adhering to guidelines wiser than the other people who are. What's a thin piece of cloth over my face gonna? Well, you remember these are all precautionary methods. When HIV and AIDS were first discovered, it was even more ridiculous. Looking back, how people thought that you could catch it or whatever, but. We'll see in the long run with things with this. I mean, there's nothing you could do but adhere to what you're being told what to do. It's
fascinating when you think about it because you brought up a good one right there. HIV, I remember, and you really have to reach back to remember, your own experiences. But I remember like cases of like kids not going to school and, they thought you can get it just by touching like a rail or something. It's all kind of like what you're hearing about COVID-19 and. I think when it all comes down to it, you're going to have to maybe not rely on a vaccine and just rely on therapeutic therapy medicine like HIV is, where you could basically live your whole life with HIV and not die from it. I have a feeling that this is that's how we're going to end this thing here. Never going to quite go away, but you'd be able to maintain it.
Until a vaccination is discovered in some kind of way. I mean,
right.
It's being left up to people that are far wiser than me, that have studied in this medical, people like my oldest who are going to school to, learn about this kind of thing, medical school. So right. It's left up to people that are far wiser than me, that are far more versed and know, biology a whole lot more than I do. I mean, the only thing I could do in the meantime is, like I said, adhere to the rules and fall in line with everybody else because with what we don't know what's out there about this thing, now's not the time to act rebellious or like you're trying to stand in something. No, now is the time more than ever we all fall into line, stay at home and that kind of thing, or what have you, whatever you're being told. But in the meantime, I have a career and something in my life I've worked 26 years at, overseas, back and forth now to establish, and I can't let that go, especially with a chance to, go back home. I mean, it's my house.
Right.
I miss my buddy Ricky. I miss all my friends. Miss Ito Mama. She's been taking great care of my house. And then the church people, the wrestling people, even fans that are exceptionally nice, business owners that I endorse their establishments and that kind of thing. It's time for me to resume. This is my third time's a charm, they say, and I can't go with Louis because with his wife and the situation with her job, it's another guy that got cheated out of this deal that could have been on that plane with me, but time marches on. Japan's not going anywhere. He's got his rain check, and in the meantime, all I could do is make good to these people on my promises. And every time something comes up and they go, "Can you make this date? Can you make that date?" And there's even a major office here lately that came to me with something, and I can't pass up on stuff like that. It's opportunity like that is not presented very often, so I have to take advantage of it while I can.
Absolutely. Now, what happened with Louis? Because I haven't talked to him in a little while. I actually I have to get him on my new social media. I ended all the Team Left Jab stuff, so I haven't talked to him in a little while. So he's not going to Japan, I guess you just said.
No, with his wife's occupation, she was campaigning for this politician, and the politician had gotten elected. So now her workload is doubled, and nobody can expect Louis. Right, and in the meantime, nobody can expect Louis to sit at home with his kids. Like, somebody has to be there for his children, and if anybody needs to be, it's got to be the parents. All the responsibility can't be dumped on just him. I mean, his wife with her occupation is already occupied. There's really nothing. If there was something that any of us could have done about the situation, we would have done it. But like I said, the plane tickets are still good for him and that kind of thing. And, he's got his rain check. The Japanese know with the coronavirus and the pandemic and everything alone, they know of the situations because, I went into grave detail with them, what's holding them up this time and what's held us up in the past. So it's all excusable stuff. It's not like anybody's bailing or anybody's burning bridges. It's just an unfortunate situation that none of us saw coming. Otherwise, we wouldn't have went through the necessary steps to getting him there to begin with.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, stuff happens. Like you said, when it's meant to be, it'll happen, and things will only probably get easier as time goes on, hopefully. So, he's waited this long. He could wait a little longer, I'm sure. He's in a good place in his wrestling career right now, too, with all the good things that are happening for him with H2O and Matt Tremont and all that. But I wanted to ask you before I forget. I've tried like crazy to try and find that Action Park documentary we were talking about last time. I can't. If you ever get a link to that, send it over my way because I can't find that thing anywhere.
Oh man, if it was as easy as me sending you my flash drive, I could have done that. Or
where did you see it? Did you see it like on Netflix or something?
Yeah, it was a buddy of mine. I mentioned to him that I wanted to see it. And he goes, "I'll tell you what, do you have room in your Google hard drive?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, can you put it on there for me?" And he goes, "Look, I'll send you a whole bunch of FMW handheld stuff that you haven't seen before." And I go, "Why were you holding out on this stuff?" He goes, "Because I'm getting it in later on this week." He goes, "But in the meantime, if you could just give me that documentary," and that's what I did.
All right.
I gave him the documentary. Sooner or later,
but I looked on YouTube and I found like a whole bunch of documentaries, but not the one that you were talking about. They're kind of like cheesy 15-minute ones that really aren't anything. So, but I'll keep an eye out for it though. It'll show up sooner or later on YouTube or something.
Either that or podcasts that people, basically from gathering their facts, people have done podcasts about it. And I'm like, you weren't even there. These are people that work there and they went to people and, you could research it all you want or you could read off Wikipedia. That's not the same as somebody that endured it and was actually there. And for anybody that was, when they pass on the story to somebody who's making a full-blown, 90-minute feature on it, these people know a whole lot more than just your average person that, like I said, scoured the internet and looked on message boards and got some stories here and there. Those people aren't in the know. There was one I heard, it was like a 45-minute podcast these two people from the UK did. And it's just like, man, this is an accumulation of stuff that they looked up on the internet.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, for anybody that was there or anything, you could relate to what was being said because you went there and you saw this for your own two eyes, and you were an impressionable kid that saw all this go down, and you were like, I remember that, or I remember that. So yeah, it's not, it's one of those deals where you'd much rather hear it right out the horse's mouth, and that's how these people, when they did this documentary, I mean, they spoke with people that worked there, that went there, they spoke. Yeah, and I mean, it's all firsthand stuff. And I mean, it's so many more fascinating tidbits of stuff that I never would have imagined, including the owner himself financing it and where he came from and his background. And it makes it even seedier and funnier. It makes it even better. When you know about the guy's background, you're like, man, this guy's as corny as any wrestling promoter. Like, this is if pro wrestling became a water park. You know what I mean? Like one of
right.
And pre-internet and that kind of thing, and the fact that it was, 60 miles from where I grew up in Jersey is like this is just all, the perfect shitstorm.
Yeah.
Oh, now that we're on this network, can I curse or?
Of course.
I forgot to even ask you.
Get as reckless as you want to get. You made the list, Tony. The Chris Jericho list. You wanted a few that I brought over from Team Left Jab, so you can curse all you want.
Oh, all right. Yeah, there was like questions I had going into it about that, and you answered so much by sending me a simple message back, and I was just, you covered so much just by answering like all my questions unintentionally when you told me about, your procedure and being someplace new here. But I don't know. I look at it as a new chapter in your life.
Yeah, you know what it is? The reason, I'll throw a little info your way as far as why I did it. And I kind of posted it, but I didn't get a great deal. Really, the main reason I did it was because Team Left Jab was originally a boxing podcast and site back in the day. And then it kind of expanded it to include wrestling and, lately, the last couple of years, comedy and all kinds of stuff. And the problem with that is that that's all good and fine, but the name is still Team Left Jab. And when you contact someone who has no clue about the show, and the first thing they see is Team Left Jab, and it still has that boxing feel. And I wanted to get a fresh start, where I could basically have anybody I want on and not have to worry about them thinking it's just a sports show or just a boxing site. So that's why I did it. I've been meaning to do it for a couple of years, just never really could pull the trigger. But it was time. It was time. And all those shows that I did, over about 1,500 shows, none of them are lost. They're all archived, and they're going to be on the Reckless website to go back and listen to. So nothing was lost. It was just, the whole thing has been revamped with a new name, and it was time for a change. Team Left Jab had run its course, and I was excited to start something new, and this is going to be even better. Yeah,
it seems to me that you have more freedom.
Yeah.
Yours has been about the only podcast I've done since I started doing yours, and back then it would just be random people contacting me, but when you got a hold of me, I knew it was somebody that if I went on in a repetitive nature, that it would be okay, because I had a vibe for the guy interviewing, and versus other guys that are just like, oh, I want hits on or downloads or whatever they are. I just, I was blown away by your inside knowledge of like actual Japanese and deathmatch and, genre wrestling. But as you know, me myself have expanded. I never was just deathmatch. I was always all across the board. It's just, I was always passionate about the deathmatch thing because, Pogo's the guy that took me under his wing. And then when he passed away, I guess Onita felt so bad for me that, Onita had always made sure that I had my fair shake and a job everywhere he went. So, but yeah, I didn't expect you to for it to be like a tell-all of all this nasty or seedy stuff that you went through. I was like, no, he's getting out on his own, doing his own thing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You know,
like
the funny thing is like that. I think the reason why people like coming on this podcast is not that it's anything special or anything like that, but you hit the nail on the head. You could talk about anything you want. I've had comedians come on here, stand-up comedians and stuff like that, and they love the fact that they could talk about comedy, but other stuff. I've had this a couple of comedians that come on regularly, and they talk a little baseball and a little politics and stuff like that. And you're right. Some of these other podcasts, they basically tell you, we're going to talk about this and that's it. I really don't care. We could talk about anything. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, whenever it was, I was lumped in with the After Dark segment, so I would sit there and I'd listen to everything all the way through, and listen to the one that was after mine, and I'm like, it covers such a broad array of subjects that, why there's a whole world out there. Why limit it to? And I'm sorry for anybody that's tuning in just to hear about wrestling, but there's so much stuff out there, a whole world. Yeah, and it's I try to provide what I can with professional wrestling and, tell the stories, but not it be like a repetitive thing where I start telling the same stories or,
right.
Oh, God, or somebody rolling their eyes going, oh, my God, he didn't shut up about these Onita stories. Well, see, these were some of the best things in my life, but there's things that were leading up to it. That there's a reason why I became the way that I became about wrestling, my attitude, about deathmatch. And then I think a lot of pictures surfaced early on in 2020 of me wrestling sans mask, just in a singlet with a pair of boots, and I'm like kind of doing like the shoot grappling thing with the Baba and Bushida and Bushida Impact and Hentai Pro and Muto Pro, which is like one of my favorite places. And it always kept me in good, like, wind shape. And then not only that, I was at Hamaguchi's gym like 6-7 days a week whenever I was home. And, I could just get my cardio up and that kind of thing. And, mid-40s and struggling to keep in shape and keep up with the younger guys and that kind of thing. To me, it was all under the wrestling umbrella. And it wasn't just simply about me doing death matches and about, death match and bleeding and stabbing and grinding and cutting. And, there was so much more out there. There's so many bookings I took where I remember one, the guy goes, listen, you're in the third match tonight. Try not to use the ropes too much. And I thought, this is going to be awesome because I'm just going to, tight waist lock, side headlock, hammer lock, top wrist lock, Japanese wrist lock. My way through things. I don't have to tackle, drop down, reverse hip toss, arm drag. I don't need it. And too, there were a lot of bookings too, the no ring stuff where mild-mannered Japanese people are paying $40 to sit there, sip tea, eat their noodles, and watch guys wrestle on mats. Like, but it's like their bohemian kind of culture over there. To me, stuff like that made it so interesting. To me, once in a while, I'd accept a booking like that, saying, "What would that look like if I wrestled Kurashimbo Kamen? He wasn't able to do that twisting corkscrew moonsault thing off the top rope. I couldn't finish him off with a moonsault. But what would that look like if we didn't have any ropes to bounce off of and we were on a mat?" Like, it personally fascinated me myself. It was something that I was a mark for, that I wanted to see. So there's, a whole broad array of stuff like that to do, not just, hey, I'm going to grab a barbed wire bat and make you bleed. There's so much more out there.
I feel like, I'm trying to think back to, like, the deathmatch wrestlers who I've had on, thinking back, obviously the interviews I've done with you and Sick Nick Mondo, and even like recent guys like Mouse and Mitch Valens, guys like that who have done matches like that. And I feel like they've all told me the same thing. They do that. They like doing those matches, but they're more than that. And they really do want to, get their regular matches in too. They don't want to just be a deathmatch wrestler, even if they do love doing it. They want to, they want the whole menu. They want to be able to do death matches, regular matches, and why wouldn't they? You're going to have more opportunities if you do everything. And even a guy like Matt Tremont. Matt Tremont told me many times. He said that's one of the reasons he wants to wrestle Cody so bad. I think it's not just that he wants to get on TV, which is obviously part of it, but he wants to show that he's not just the guy who has the fork sticking out of his head and bleeds like crazy. That he can wrestle, and everybody knows he can. But at least the people who know him know he can. But he wants to show it.
I went on record about Matt Tremont and said the last 5 minutes of his debut match in Japan. It was on an A-Team house show because A-Team, Tomohiko Hashimoto and Hasegawa. They'll book Onita and that kind of thing, but they worked hand in hand with when FMW went under. They took in half the roster, and then the other half of the roster, just kind of went and did the freelancing thing. And I'm very loyal to A-Team, but Tremont's debut for A-Team Pro Wrestling, where we're in a six-man, the last 5 minutes of that match literally were him just going near fall, back and forth, for like 5 minutes. And I'm watching him do like side roll-ups, inside cradle, small packages, sunset flips. And, it really was, it wasn't an eye-opener to me. I knew he knew how to do all that stuff, but I'd never seen him actually grapple and do it. With me, I love the look on people's faces when they see me go from a, switch in, turn in, tight waist lock, behind full Nelson, half Nelson, snap mare, roll back, cradle, inside 1-2, rock back inside, fish out of the water, whatever stuff that we do. I love looking at the look on people's faces, like Pro Wrestling ST, Jujo, they run at this tiny little puny dojo. And they draw maybe 50, 75 people that all stand outside wherever they can watch this. And inside there, I wrestled Keita Yano, Sheik Yano. He goes Keita in the house. He wrestles under all these wacky gimmicks. The first 5 minutes with him were literally all like grappling. I hate when people refer to it as chain wrestling because then it just gets like a stamp. No, this was wrestling. Like, we did everything that we could, every switch in, turn in, everything that you would see at like a collegiate level. That's fun to me. And the look on people's faces to see me with the mask, put down the chainsaw and not drop the gimmick, but show people, hey, look, there's a top wrist lock. You're not seeing me grind some guy's head into barbed wire for a few minutes. You're watching me wrestle. And I just enjoyed looking at the look on people's faces. Like, I didn't think he could, that he did all that stuff. Well, it's because it's guys like Tahara going with him to the Ice Ribbon Dojo, or when Great Muda had his Wrestle One Dojo up, and we'd go into places like that, and he and I would just screw around for 10 minutes doing nothing but reversals and all kinds of wacky stuff. And then we started playing a game where every time we would grab a hold, we're like, find a different way out of it each time. This is the kind of universal stuff that was blending and really gelled. And it's why, Yoichi Tahara is like one of my favorite guys, because he does everything. And not only that, he's done Jakara. He's done a lot of stuff in North America, but he's done even more in Mexico. So he's so well versed in like every style, and there's nothing that we can't do to each other that would have that kind of. The only thing he wanted from out of me was, he goes, you got to show me more of that Southern style. Tennessee, you spent all that time in Memphis. He's like, I like American style, and I'm like, I like it. I was like, but what the other stuff you and I do makes us sweat more. It's more of a workout. It's more of I feel more accomplished, and I discover something new every single time. Right. So it's stuff like that, like the grappling arts, that kind of fascinate me. Not only that, like when I do the stuff where you've seen the ring with the chains on it.
Yeah.
With stuff like with Hanawa, all the stuff I did with Hanawa, all of that is like crucifix, rolled back, 1-2, kick out, hook the leg, roll back, back and forth, 1-2. That stuff is some of my favorite, because then I I proved to I'd like to think that I proved to people, but I just proved to myself that, all the very basics are still there. And it's so universal because you call nothing. You're doing it all on the fly. So, I mean, to me, there's nothing better than, proving to myself mostly, but for any of the people out there that doubt it, it's out there. The footage itself. I was going to close with, I wish to God that I had that match, our debut match, where Tremont went back and forth. I mean, that would shut up all doubters that don't think that he can do anything but deathmatch,
Right. No, I was just going to throw in there that I have a feeling the answer is going to be no, but I'll ask anyway. Did you ever have a scenario in Japan or in the United States where you didn't do as much of the death match or the Leatherface gimmick and the fans weren't happy?
I get people that kind of take a step back, like, they expect me to bleed buckets, but in short, the answer is no, but you can go to court and you could plead guilty, but you could do guilty with an explanation.
Yeah.
I almost want to say no, but with an explanation. In 2017, at the height of the whole Leatherface thing, I was like, when I go back stateside, I was like, I just see myself doing the Leatherface thing and just doing that whole, like, gimmick to the high. One, pretty much to hide my age, and two, not only was it a way for me to be very selective of the bookings I do, but also, too, it was a way for me to not burn myself out and take, like, every booking I can. There's a local promotion that runs at least 2-3 times a week on any given weekend. That's only about 10 minutes from my house, and it's the very place that one of the schools I broke in at. And I could always go there and just Tony Myers, and I'm already in their ECPW Hall of Fame or whatever. But I always thought I could always go back to it. That's not really a problem. That's not really an issue. But then it's kind of a waste of having all this hair and
yeah.
Yeah, it was also an excuse for me to, discover things outside of wrestling, and I'm really glad of how things worked out, that, I was able to use that as like an excuse of only wanting to do the Leatherface thing here in the States. But on top of it, it was also another reason for me to pretty much accept less bookings, but also to, work out any rust, and, I have new gear made up and stuff like that all the time. And an abundance of 8x10s I'm trying to get rid of. So, yeah, and not only that, as much as it started to surface more and more of me doing the gimmick in Japan, it became like more demand here in America. The only problem was, my asking price wasn't ridiculous, but it was enough for a lot of people to take a step back and be like, well, we're not drawing them like that. And me going, okay, then I'll be a normal person and do without wrestling that weekend and go to a regular job. And I mean, that's what a man's supposed to do, work, right? So.
Right. You brought up the 8x10s, and we talked about this last time or the time before when I brought up the signings that Rob Feinstein does. I've noticed that basically they are everywhere on Facebook, especially now. I mean, not just Rob Feinstein. A whole crap load of people are doing these virtual signings, and I guess it's because a lot of the shows aren't happening, so that wrestlers are trying to make money elsewhere. But man, if you go on Facebook, and I'm sure you see it too, you have a lot of wrestling fans and wrestlers on your Facebook. Do you see that? It's like every night you see like maybe 10 of these shows going on, it seems like.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I actually have a friend of mine who's been a buddy of mine for the last 2.5-3 decades. Basically, we kind of sort of broke in a weird way. Mike Sharp's was another wrestling school that I went to when I was maybe 18, 19 years old. But he had gotten Sergeant Slaughter to sign his wrestling board game. You remember the wrestling board game that they sold?
Oh, yeah.
The old pro wrestling. Yeah. He got Sergeant Slaughter to sign his. He's had it since childhood.
You
and I was
it
like,
in,
oh,
right?
my
You
God,
mail
there's
it
a
to the
video.
guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, there's a video of Sergeant Slaughter signing your like wrestling board game. Like, how fantastic is that?
It is.
I mean,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I still have the WrestleMania. You know, you would put in the VCR. Remember the old WWF WrestleMania board game? Can you imagine if I had guys like Bruce Beefcake sign now? Like, you know, how wicked would that be? You know?
Yeah, they're doing it too. I mean, I see them every night. You see these guys. I saw Sergeant Slaughter doing one or two of those shows just the other night.
Yeah, so I mean, like, my hat's off to anybody that has found wrestling-wise, given the comment, you know, given the modern day, everything, the pandemic that's going on, but anybody who's able to put it out there or socially distance in the correct way and continue to run. And that, I mean, here's a place like WWE who gets $1 billion a year off their syndication, right?
Right.
So they must provide constant context. I mean, they have not stopped running since the pandemic.
Right.
But, you know, they have their own accommodations and that kind of thing. And they, I guess, you know, there's been the whole thing with Corona and issues with them and their lack of, you know, safety and that kind of thing. But to anybody that's doing it right, and, you know, I saw several where fans are, and I saved pictures from Facebook because every time I see it in Japan where they're running sumo matches, but everybody has a pod, I thought that was like the coolest thing. Like, if you're able to be, or some of the major Japanese promotions, they jack up the ticket prices. They run the huge arenas, but everybody is in social distancing.
Right.
You know, we talked about it a little bit the last time that I was on. Yeah, anybody that's able to pull that off and to think outside the bubble and be able to pull that off and do that kind of thing, my hat's off to people like that. People like that deserve to make as much as they can, you know, given the current situation with professional wrestling. Like, if you're able to run in a safe environment and people are 6 feet apart, they have masks, and the wrestlers are tested and everything is good there, you know, I enjoy seeing stuff like that. People having to think abnormally and people having to come up with different ways. And too many people crapped all over, like Joey Janela having the social distancing match with, I guess it was Jimmy Lloyd. I thought it was ingenious.
Yeah.
They had a social distance match where they didn't.
Yeah,
they were
I
6
saw
feet
that.
apart.
Yeah. It was on like TMZ, I think. They even had a little article on it about 6 months ago.
Yeah, like, if anybody on this planet thinks that I need to, and that's cool because we're on here and I don't have to, you know, watch my mouth. If anybody thinks I need to suck Jimmy Lloyd and or Joey Janela's dick, they got another thing coming. I make more money than I ever thought I would deserve in my life for being a wrestler elsewhere, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with either one of those two. Right. So if I give my hats off to somebody for something that they pulled off that I found entertaining, I got no reason to suck anybody's dick. That's just me being honest.
Right.
So with that said, if you do something and it catches my attention like that and it gets a chuckle out of me and I enjoy the creativity, then at least in my eyes you've done something that's entertained me, and I'll put it over. Because like I said, it's something that got my attention. It's something that I enjoyed. Should everybody enjoy it, or does everybody enjoy it? No, and that's not the whole creative process behind it. But I understand what they're doing, and I think it's brilliant.
Absolutely, yeah. It was an entertaining match. I mean, Janela would be the one to pull that off, and of course Jimmy Lloyd as well, because he did those Invisible Man matches that Cornette loved so much. So he kind of had the recipe already down as far as wrestling someone that wasn't there, right?
Yeah, I mean, and he himself, you know, I mean, Cornette's the walking encyclopedia of wrestling, and or the walking Wikipedia of, and that's all well and good and everything, but to be so set in your ways and to be so close-minded, especially with the pandemic and all that's going on, and to discredit somebody who thinks outside the box when so much has already been done with wrestling, and it gets to the point where it's redundant and nobody truly cares.
Yeah.
You know, You know, for an old timer, I was listening to one of his recent podcasts, and he's talking about, and then we did this show and that show, and everything's a show, and then we did this show in Oklahoma, and this show here, and this show there. I'll tell you this, like in some of the first couple of years I was down in Memphis, I remember one time I asked Buddy Wayne, I go, what time's the show start? And he chewed me out. And he goes, you know, just for future reference, son, you know, he said, it's not a show. You ask, what time do the matches begin? It's not a show. He's like, this, you know, it's to be treated like a sport, not even a business, a sport. He's like, so you ask, what time do the matches begin? And I remember Jerry Lawler himself chewed me out. And then when they went and did the whole Smoky Mountain Wrestling versus USWA thing, they even brought up in front of Bob Armstrong, and Bob Armstrong said, yeah, man, nobody ever smartened you up to that? And I was like, no, sir. And he told me, he was like, you know, back in my day, they'd have chewed me out too. And, you know, he kind of pulled me on the side and he goes, it's going to seem harsh what us old folks tell you. And he goes, but if you look at it, it's right. It shouldn't be a show. He's like, whatever you do, don't say that in front of anybody. And he goes, and another thing, he goes, early on I walked in and you asked me if I was a face, or, you know, you asked me, or you pointed out the face locker room and the heel locker room. He's like, always say baby face, don't say face. He goes, that's some shit that I think Dave Meltzer made up. It was stuff like that. And I'm listening to an old timer like Cornette going, and then we did this show in Oklahoma, and then after that we did this show here. You know, so a lot of what he says kind of contradicts. I mean, if you're that old school and set in your ways, you would definitely know, never refer to it as a show.
Right. He's set in his own ways, I guess, so he feels like no matter what he calls it, whatever, he's always right, but that's Cornette for you. But he still has a lot of knowledge. I still listen to some of his stuff here and there. He's making a lot of money criticizing, though, I believe. I mean, I think that's his whole I think if he didn't criticize on his podcast, nobody would really listen to it. So I think he's kind of almost like he's flipped it around to where he's using it to his advantage now. And he's staying relevant because of all the criticism. But it is what it is. I know he hits AEW every week, that's for sure.
You got to have some level of dedication. I don't sit through any of the WWE programming, NXT, Raw. I don't sit through any of the AEW simply because I don't have the time. But you have to have a level of commitment to sit and watch any of that for the elongated period of time. I got tuned in this week because he had the Bertrand guy on, the guy that did the autobiography on Andre the Giant. And I was always fascinated with the Akira Maeda match and everything that led up to it. Akira Maeda himself, I've always been fascinated by. And I don't care what Wikipedia says. I think they have him listed at like 6'2", 6'3". And even now, even at his accelerated age, he looks like he's 6'2", 6'3" now. And he's like a halfway hunched over old man. But that guy's a mountain. I mean, he's a big dude even now. But Maeda blurred the lines between shoot and work so much that, you know, and other people just kind of looked at him like an uncooperative jerk. But I always saw him as a guy with a pair of balls that just wouldn't take any less. You know, he started the original UWFI. They left, you know, because like Tiger Mask's ego was out of control and the company was going under anyway. When he came back to New Japan, though, in the mid-'80s, you could hardly find a bigger one-man drawing card in the entire country of Japan. To this day, his initial run when he came back after UWFI, it is just like mind-boggling. People never forgot about the guy. And I was at the Todoken, the wrestling museum, and I ran into him there. And he just like walked past me, and I knew who he was, and I didn't want to even look him in the eyes. I just bowed, and he walked past me. But yeah, just the stature of that man alone, which again, you know, all this really leads to me, you know, listening to Cornette's podcast. But yeah, the stuff that I heard on his podcast, I thought boy, for an old timer and as guy as soured as he was, this, that, and the other, something like the almighty sin of calling it a show and not calling it matches or the town or whatever. To me, that's really new age thinking or new age, it's a new age way of expression to call it, a show.
Right.
The old timers would chew you up and spit you out. Same way I was in my early 20s in Memphis, calling it that.
Yeah. Amazing. It's amazing when you think about it. Yeah, you're right. You wouldn't expect that from him. When you head back to Japan now, do you have a lot of shows lined up, or is it kind of limited because of coronavirus still? I think you said it's pretty much, it's kind of back to normal, right?
It's kind of sort of in a weird way. I told you Basement Monstar continues to run. And there are, any given Saturday, I think I covered this before, there are at least 4 between Production H, the Flight of the Century, which they messed up in the translation, Bushida Impact, and then Bushida, another offshoot promotion that names their events by which event takes place. Those guys are still regularly running. WWS out of Isesaki City is Isesaki Mat Pro, which is based off of Yappy. They're still going. So a lot of these places didn't stop running because of the pandemic. They just, to get around it, they advise people to download their, the events that they hold, and they jack up ticket prices for whoever's there live. Well, the people there want to go there live and pay more money because that's all they've done is save their money since the pandemic, because there is no nightlife. There is no entertainment out there. Professional wrestling is easier because a ring takes up a whole lot less, space than a football field or a soccer field or a baseball field, So I'd say there was an overall decrease of maybe 20% of as busy as I was in the bookings, which to me is a saving grace. Because as I, age and get older, I mean, I can't go night after night after night like the way it used to be. And even now, there's not even that given opportunity in Japan because people like All Japan, New Japan, they've all cut back anyway. So, it kind of leaks down to the independents too, who have, cut back as well. There's not as many independents running like that were running before because of the fear that, hey, we can't draw 500 people. We have to draw 200 people and hope that they're going to pay what those 500 people would pay, or hope that the downloads are there from the people that, have it on their phone or home computer or anything like that. So, what I just said in short was there's been a slight decrease, but overall it's not enough to be too noticeable.
Okay.
I'm still having to tell several independents, I'm sorry, I'm booked on that date. So, okay. And yeah, if you're an independent wrestler, I remember telling a few of the GCW guys like Jimmy Lloyd and especially Alex Colon this. I was like, if you get a chance, go out to Naoshi Sano's bar because it's a pro wrestling theme bar at a Shinjuku. Very, very extremely busy area in Tokyo. And all throughout the night, independent promoters come in and drop off their posters to them. And they see you sitting there and they go, hey, what are you doing on the 18th? This happens all the time. And at least a half dozen promoters of wrestling personalities come in there and, hey, man, you going to be around Japan a while? One of those deals.
Right,
so it's a great place to network. The only drawback is if you don't know Japanese, well, you're going to I hope you got Google Translate and you could speak fast and wisely because you'll miss out on work.
Yeah, absolutely. So we hit a lot of stuff here as far as the wrestling. You going back to Japan. We're going to move on to the Twilight Zone in a second. Before that, though, any thoughts on the election coming up? Anything at all, or are you just kind of waiting and seeing like most of us?
let's wait and see, because it all reminds me of it might have actually been in Playboy magazine, where two kids are swapping baseball cards. And this was back in like the mid 80s when everybody was screwing up, and half the Dallas Cowboys were winding up in jail, and the Oakland Raiders, and the two kids are swapping these baseball cards, and they're like, "Hey man, I'll trade your wife beater for murder." You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's what kind of the election reminds me of. It's Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and then it doesn't stop with Donald Trump. So it's like, it'll be interesting to see, but I was out of the country the last the last two elections. I was nowhere to be found in America. So with or without me, it was funny because the last time I went over to my parents' place, my mom told me, she goes, somebody called the home phone and asked where you were and if you had cast your ballot and if you were mailing in your ballot. And I was like, well, whatever happens, happens, with or without me. So it's not that I'm anti-political. I hate getting in the middle of people's arguments, and Democrats fussing at the Republicans, and the Republicans blame the Democrats for this and that. And, it's just so, life is too short. I'm sorry. I probably wouldn't have voted for anybody anyway, even if it was stateside.
That's
it's. Oh no, I was pointing out. I didn't want to be one of those guys to why cram to me it's kind of like religion as well. Why cram your thoughts down someone else's throat? You're not going to enlighten anybody. You're not going to change anybody's mind. And if you could change somebody's mind by saying this or doing that, as far as politics go, I mean, if somebody could be that easily manipulated, those kind of people shouldn't be given the power to vote to begin with.
Right. Exactly.
And then when you get to the muckraking part of the campaign, it would just change it. Like they would flip-flop back and forth, wouldn't they?
Let's get to the fun part right here. And last time, on Team Left Jab, actually, we were talking about the Twilight Zone, and I came up with the idea of let's come up with a list. And you do have a list. Now, how many episodes is on this list that you have?
Okay, I came up with the top 15 because
that's a good number.
Because I said,
I don't even remember
I can go
what number
20.
I told you.
Yeah, I remember asking you. I can go 20, I could go 25 because they were all off the top of my head. And then now I realize I don't know how long this is going to be, but I can give you an abbreviated version so that it fits within the confines of a podcast where it's not long and drawn out.
We'll do it. We don't have to rush through it, but we don't. We don't have to dissect like every episode for half an hour because then we'll never make it. Then.
Yeah.
So we'll, 5 minutes. 3 to 5 minutes a show. That'll work.
Yeah,
so
and there's trivial.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's trivial notes that off the top of my head, just some things just stick in my mind about certain issues or certain episodes, or
Yeah, and then I'll throw in my thoughts on it as well. So we'll start with we'll work up. We'll start with number 15.
Okay. Season 5, episode 25, The Masks.
Oh, that's one of my favorites right there.
This takes place during the entire, they're by Bourbon Street, as you can see throughout the episode, because they show I don't know if it's stock footage that's plugged into it. It appears to be. Either that or they did an ingenious way of filming this. The man is visited by a doctor and is told he doesn't have long to live. And in this incurring thing, he decides to make, he takes a mask, because masks are all around during Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
And they are in New Orleans, of course. And he has these masks, and he said, each of these masks represent each of your personalities.
Right.
And, of course, you see, the twist ending, which, spoiler alert for all 15 of these that we count down. They go to remove the damn mask, and they have inherited that personality because it is their personality anyway, because they're all greedy bastards that just want the old man's money.
Right. That's one of my favorite episodes. When I see that's coming on, I stop what I'm doing. I put the computer to the side, whatever it is I'm doing, and I just watch it because it's just one of the greatest episodes of that entire series. And you're right. It's just to see the faces and the music that the haunting music that plays as they take those masks off. It's just it's some scene. It's unbelievable. That's a great episode. One thing too, Tony, before you continue, these 15 episodes, this is all the old series, right? Or did you plug in the newest series as well?
Yeah, because I did watch every last one of the new series, and for anybody that hasn't seen, they filmed 2 seasons in 2019. They filmed 2 seasons, and they showed them 10 episodes and another 10 episodes, and it was on CBS All Access. And I watched all 20 of those episodes, and each one of them are such an awesome throwback, but they're brought to the new era where people are looking in their phones and they're showing you what they're looking at. And, each and almost every single one of those episodes are such an awesome throwback. The narration's incredible. Just watch them if you can, people. But, the Hitchhiker, watching the family rejoice, knowing that the old man's going to kick the bucket, and the twist ending, everything about this episode, I'm in love with. It just goes to show and exposes his own family, his own flesh and blood, and their greed, and it's everything about it. It's the ultimate, you reap what you sow.
Right. That's a great one. One of my favorites for sure. Which one did you have for 14?
Wow, ranking in at number 14. From the very first season, it is the 16th episode ever in the series. The Hitchhiker.
Oh, yeah.
What can be said about this? And imagine, this weighs in at number 14, so we got some doozies to go.
Oh, yeah.
The woman that has the flat tire, and you're seeing her with car trouble, and she keeps on seeing this hitchhiker over and over and over again, and then as it's revealed later on, it is in fact the Grim Reaper, because she calls back home to find out that she has passed away. And then, so then it's revealed, of course, that the hitchhiker was indeed the Grim Reaper, warning her of her demise and her passing. But it starts out in Pennsylvania, and she's on a cross-country journey, and things go awry. And there's almost so much, it's almost like you have to use your imagination in some of the older filming of the episodes, because, God, I could do a whole episode on Rod Serling himself.
Yeah.
And his fight with the network and that kind of thing. But you could see that they weren't giving him much in the way of a budget. And
right. Yeah,
the writing itself was unbelievable. And the pacing, too, behind it. It's just when you think one thing is over, something else jumps out and hits you right in the face, especially with the hitchhiker.
Yeah, so basically what it was, if I remember right, is that she basically had died in an accident, and I guess maybe her soul just wasn't ready to go, and like you said, the Grim Reaper was just following her everywhere, basically saying it's your time to go.
Yeah, and she calls her mom, and she finds out that her mother actually had a nervous breakdown over her death. So yeah, I mean, the suspense and how she reacts to everything else is just everything about this episode is it's one of those things where you can't just watch it just once. You want to watch it like over and over. Hence why it's saved to my crappy laptop that's falling apart. So
yeah, it's an excellent episode. It's a haunting episode for sure. 13.
13, also from the very first season, the 22nd episode. The Monsters Do on Maple Street.
Okay. That's considered, just to throw this in there before you start, that's considered like one of the top 5 on a lot of lists, from what I remember, all throughout the years.
And 2, it was written by Rod Serling. It was written by he himself. Yeah. So it's another one of those things where it just it pretty much just walks you into just the paranoia that sets in. Paranoia that sets in as far as like humanity goes and everything else. How we're pretty much our own worst enemies, and how you could exploit fear.
Really
because everybody's standing around.
Yeah, I was going to say, it really shows how people can easily turn on each other over misunderstandings.
Yeah, and the entire time, each of the neighbors are pretty much blaming each other. You're the monster. Yeah. You're the monster. Yeah, I think, no, you're the monster, you know. And then, of course, the iconic ending where, you know, they zoom out and it's really just a bunch of aliens looking down, laughing at humanity who are willing to stab each other in the back. And, yeah, there's just so much about everything that there is to love about an episode like that, because it shows, like, the exploitation of the average human being and just how petty they can be and how they want to pass the buck. Yeah.
One part of that episode that I like, and it's just simply a line, is one of the neighbors, one of the women neighbors says to one of the other neighbors, like, yeah, I see you standing in your yard like at 3 a.m. looking up at the sky, and it's like, so they're already like kind of like looking at each other with a crooked eye to begin with before any of this even happens. Yeah,
and it's a neighbor versus neighbor witch hunt.
Yeah,
and it also goes to show you. Which Serling himself was so against prejudices, and but this shows you how prejudices like destroy any kind of anybody, you know, and the stock footage that they use in this thing is absolutely incredible. There's actually oh my gosh, they reused a stairwell. It was a stairwell that was reused from an earlier episode. They reused that, and they used some of the old stock footage too, which I thought was like absolutely fascinating. But you have to watch for you really got to watch for a lot of stuff in the Twilight Zone episodes. There's so much stuff that just kind of like blurs in with other episodes. But yeah, that's easily like one of my favorite ones right there. I mean, which I guess bleeds right into number 12.
What do you got?
3rd season, episode 14. 4 characters that are in search of. Okay,
that's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a Christmas.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In search of an exit.
Yeah, the hobo, ballerina, army drill sergeant. All of these people that are all together, and they can't figure out how in the world they got there. And they're like, you know, why are we like such a walking stereotype? Where the hell are we? And the whole time, like, sporadically you hear this giant gong that's going on. And you're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
And I mean, the whole time you're saying to yourself, like, like, what is that? And, you know, you see all 5 of them that are complete strangers. Now they're all having to, like, work together to try to get out of this. And it's like a giant cylinder that they're stuck in. This, like, giant white cylinder. And they try to form, like, a human chain to get to the very top of the cylinder. And each and every time, even with all the cooperation, they keep failing and they keep failing. And you're sporadically hearing this giant dong sound. Yeah. And you're wondering, like, what is going on? And either you could give the big reveal or I could give it in detail.
Oh, you can give it.
Oh, okay. The giant reveal is that it is a woman that is collecting money, and she's donging a giant bell. She's ringing a giant bell, and every time the bell is hitting the actual like thing that she's holding for money, it's making this loud donging sound.
Yeah.
So and then it finally all makes sense what was being said all along. But just the 5 characters alone, and you know, I mean, just the entire waking up and coming to, and you know, what are we doing here? What is going on? We don't understand it, and all their personalities and everything, but they all kind of mesh together to try to work for a better world and get the hell out of there, and their horrible situation that they're in, only to reveal in the end that they're all 5 of them, in fact, they're just pawns.
They're just dolls.
And
They're just dolls that are being collected for kids for Christmas.
Right. And you're just seeing these dolls that are all just sitting there, but of course they're animated. But they're given their own lives, and it's once you see the end of the episode, it would ruin anything else like leading up to it.
Right.
So I would advise anybody to sit down from the very beginning and watch this entire thing, even though we spoiled to them how it ends. But
that's a good one.
Up to that point, I remember the very first time I watched this. I'll refer to it as number 12, because it's 12th on our list. When every time that I remember the very first time I sat there and I watched it, I was like, "What the hell? Like, what kind of twist ending would make any of this make any sense whatsoever?" But yeah, it's a doozy when it finally gets revealed.
Oh yeah,
when it finally gets revealed in the end.
Right.
And all of them falling down and everything.
Yeah.
But two of the coolest thing is when the ballerina, it finally ends and the ballerina reaches out, and then you see her start crying.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, what more can be possibly said about it? I mean, just absolute classic writing, classic pacing, classic dialogue, where you, the viewer, are like, hey, in the world, what is happening here?
Yeah, that's a great episode for sure. So we're up to number 11.
This was from the 3rd season. It was the 24th episode. And there's a lot of trivial things about this one, but To Serve Man.
Oh, yeah. That's a great one.
9-foot-tall aliens.
What did they call them again? Cannabis? Well, cannabis is weed, but what did they had a name. Something with a K. I got to look that up.
My God, it escapes me right now. If you remember this, though, Richard Kiel was one of the aliens. He played Jaws in 007.
Right.
So it's kind of sort of where he got, he's under one of the masks of the aliens, so.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And the lead alien and just, oh, man. It's so many things about this episode. There's so many, trivial notes about it. But 2 was one of the only ones that breaks the fourth wall, where they talk about humanity and, are we our own worst enemy? But then they find out that, they wipe the dust off and they find out that this magical book is actually a book to cook human beings.
To actually serve man.
Yeah, to actually serve man. And I mean, it's given away in the title, but until you get to that point, you
don't even realize it.
Yeah. You don't realize it, but all the signs are there.
I just looked it up real quick. They were called CORNETTE. I knew it was something with a K.
There we are. Yes.
Yeah. 9-foot-tall aliens.
And it's to also show that the advanced technologies could be the worst thing for us.
Yeah.
So take that for what you will. It's pretty much prevalent as to what we're looking at in this day and era, but
definitely.
It's done in such what's the word I'm looking for? It's done in such a primitive way, but as to show in the grand scheme of things, But 2, it's the only episode of note that I can imagine of all the Twilight Zones that shatters the fourth wall. Where they're actually where the lead alien is actually speaking to the camera,
right,
at one given point. So, yeah, it's an episode, like I said, with the aliens and everything else. To serve man. And to me, there have been so many rip-offs of this thing, and so many things that have been taken in a different direction. What comes to mind is, Soylent Green. It's the people.
Yeah. Right,
Pretty much the same kind of premise, if you think about it, in a weird roundabout way.
Yeah.
Which I suppose brings us to number 10.
Top 10 starting.
Okay, number 10. Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
That's one of my favorites. That was one of my favorites as a kid too.
Yeah, it's just a giant carpet monster. But you remember in the 4th season they went to a 1-hour format.
Yeah,
and one of the reasons too was
miniature.
because
I remember.
Yeah, one of the main backers for him had pulled out, and then they found somebody at the last minute. So Rod Serling was forced to write 1-hour episodes, but going into season 5, which is this from, and it's only the 3rd episode in the 5th season. He went back to the half-hour format, which left things coming at you a million miles an hour. People tend to believe that this was William Shatner's debut in this series. It was far from it. He had already had like 2 prior appearances or whatever. But it was supposed to have been like a gremlin, but it was in fact like a carpet monster. And this was just a glaring, obvious look at the fact that the studio was no longer going to finance Rod Serling's silly project. That and the internal fighting with him at the studios is something, like I said, you can do an entire 5-hour podcast on how at war he was with them. But, too, there was a real issue. Like, Ford didn't want Chevy products because they were one of the main people for their commercials and things like that. But, everything about this episode where his wife is actually beside him, and the guy just got out of a sanitarium for having like a nervous breakdown. So here he is, the boy crying wolf, saying, and he keeps calling over the flight crew. It's like, there's a gremlin on the wing of this plane. It's so glaring and obvious to him, but nobody else believes him because they think he's a friggin' wacko.
Yeah.
This was actually Richard Bonner. He had directed Lethal Weapon years and years later on. He was the one that was responsible for directing this. I always thought that was one of the like glaring, obvious, really cool things to point out. But long story short, he busts open the emergency door, and can you imagine? He actually shoots the gremlin, and the funny thing is that looking back in time, he shoots the gremlin with an officer's gun that was on board.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is before everybody lost their mind. And they were doing like, exactly. I mean, like that would never exist, of course, nowadays. But just imagine him kicking open the emergency door and shooting this gremlin off the wing of the plane. And, of course, it's revealed that all along he was right. While they're wheeling them off, of course, this was redone for their movie and has been spoofed so many times over the years. Just like the prior, number 11, the Simpsons themselves spoofed it with the aliens that they had invading in like one of the Treehouse of Horror, like one of the early episodes of The Simpsons. Yeah. This thing has been spoofed halfway to death about it. There's a gremlin on the wing of this plane, and they had John Lithgow. Yeah, and I think like later on in his career, he wound up spoofing it. Like there was a gremlin. You don't believe me? And, I mean, I guess he did like what, Third Rock from the Sun, back in the late 90s.
He did the movie, right?
Yeah, and he made a reference to that. So.
It was that's definitely one of the most iconic episodes. And even though that outfit was kind of corny now, when you look back at it, it's iconic because even when you look at like the figures and stuff that they made over the years, it's like you couldn't imagine that gremlin anything but what it was with the big fur coat, costume and the rubber soles underneath that you see when he's on all fours pulling the thing. It's a great episode.
Yeah, you see the guy's sneakers and everything, but
it's
almost like I said,
pajamas.
Yeah, no, it was like a giant like furry suit.
That's all it was.
Didn't even.
Yeah.
It didn't make any reason or rhyme or anything like that. It's supposed to be like a fearsome gremlin.
Awesome episode. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, you talk about suspense and the way that Serling and them could direct and put into. Or not direct, not this episode, but the way that to me, it was the way that the suspense and everything carried out throughout these episodes was just unreal to look at. I mean, they could really, really capture your emotion and draw you into it. And to me, it was like episodes like this are just, I mean, they speak throughout all the years of time, just how unbelievable they were at the writing, the pacing, everything else. And this is, like I mentioned before, after they had gotten back their half-hour concept of Twilight Zone. So it holds near and dear to my heart. And 10th one that we reach here, I mean, it was just, it definitely stands the hands of time, you know.
Absolutely.
To this day, whenever I'm traveling via airplane, I always think about Gremlin on the wing of the plane.
Look out there just in case.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do that. I'll damn near glance at
the engine.
We actually talked in such detail about number 9, but it is so great to gloss over and go back over again. Which, yeah, brings us to number 9. Now that we're inside of single digits, here we go. And it was only the 5th episode that aired out of the first season. Walking Distance.
Oh, that's the... I'll just throw it out there. If I didn't get a chance to make my list because, you know, I made this big change, but honestly, that would have been my number 1 right there. There's just something about that episode. Yeah, only because, you know, when I was younger, I would have never picked this episode because it didn't have any monsters in it and stuff like that. But, you know, as I've gotten older, you just, it's so sentimental because everybody, and we talked about this at length last time or the time before, everybody has that moment or moments in their life when they just wish they could go back.
When they could go back and, you know,
Simpler
grab a hold
time,
of your younger self.
Friends that you lost are there again. I mean, everybody goes through this.
Right, and you see the parents intervene with him because the guy goes back and visits his old childhood, sees himself running around. So he's trying to forewarn himself about the future, and, you know, he comes across as this crazy man, which you can imagine if this happened realistically in real life, you would look like a complete wacko telling this little, you know, 6-7-year-old boy, you know, I'm you from the future, and just, you know, and then of course the parents interject, going, "What is wrong with you?" And he's like, "I'm him. I'm your son. I'm all grown up," and he's like trying to show them ID, and he knows so much about his past, and the parents are even looking at him like, "Look, buddy, I don't know how you got this information, but you're insane. Like, you know, keep away from my boy."
Right.
And then, of course, the carousel incident, the kid falling off the carousel, and now he has a noticeable limp because of it, you know, and because of what he has done in his past, or revisit himself, you know, from the future to the past. Yeah, the whole limp thing is really what sticks out almost the most. That and the utter confusement and shock of the people that he runs into that just think he's a complete wacko. And it almost tells you, like, in a pretty strange way by itself, the past is the past, and you're just better off letting it go.
Yeah. Well, I think just to throw something in there, I think 2 of the most iconic speeches, or whatever you want to call it, happened in this episode. The first one, like you were saying before, is when the father was talking to him, the grown-up version of him, and says what you just said, saying that, you know, you're looking in the past, you know, maybe if you look in the future, you'll see some of the things you're looking for as well. And then also at the end, when Rod Serling says what I said earlier about everybody tries to go back, and, you know, it hits you.
Yeah, and 2, it's a constant reminder of what's in the past. You're much better off just living your life for now and moving on and not reflecting so much on the past, but look to your future. You know, and how it changes.
Yeah, I was just going to throw one more thing in there. The funny thing is, it's like, apparently, if I remember right, the guy was like only like 35 years old, but he was like an executive or whatever. And that's kind of young to be looking back that hard. I mean, I can see looking back that hard like when you're in your mid-40s or 50s, but this dude was only like 35 years old, which is kind of weird. He looked older, obviously, and he probably was in real life, but I would have probably, if there was any change I would have made, I would have had him maybe 45 or something like that. 35 is a little too young to be looking back that hard.
Yeah, that much, that hard, but it's too kind of sort of the way that I look at it is back then, and especially with Rod Serling himself, who passed by the age of 50, because
I guess
he
that was
smoked
older.
like
yeah.
3-4 packs of cigarettes a day will do that to you. But two, this was one of Rod Serling's personal favorite stories that he told.
Oh yeah.
Because it reminded him so much of him growing up in Binghamton, New York.
Right.
And about him wanting to do this, and about him wanting to go back and visit himself and a younger him, and things that he could forewarn himself of, and that kind of thing. And you know, underline, it's got a story of truth to it. Of and the funny thing is that each and every one of the episodes of Twilight Zone were always about either somebody getting their comeuppance or somebody pretty much that reap what they sowed.
Always a lesson.
There's so many honorable mentions I could throw out about this. I talked about the one last time with the guy with the gambling.
Yeah.
And, how the guy just, everything that he wishes for, he winds up getting.
Right.
And you see him winning like hundreds of dollars, which back then was like thousands upon thousands. Yeah. And he keeps winning, and he's banging all these chicks all these hot dames that he always wished that he could. And by the end of the episode, he's just so bored with himself. Like, there's almost so many honorable mentions that you can point out about how, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing, like with the Twilight Zone. But I think with this specific one, was more or less like a precautionary tale of if you do not move on with your life, and if you spend too much time reflecting back and thinking of what changed and what could have been and that kind of thing. But he easily did a fantastic job of giving the precautionary tale of what would happen if
you live in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and you could see why it was one of his personal favorite things to do was this episode, because, man, it really hit home with him.
Absolutely. Hit home with me. It's an excellent episode, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even so, like, when I go to visit my parents, I mean, they're in the very house that I grew up in, that I was born, at a hospital and brought back here and, lived the next, 18 years of my life before I was old enough. I was out on my own and to Memphis for the next 17 years of my life. So it makes me look around the house that I grew up in, but I don't want to reflect too much or too hard back on it because, about my dad's cancer now, God forbid I was, or that I chose to hang around that house or stay at that house or that kind of thing. It would have been like beating myself up or beating myself over the head with my childhood, because countless hours I spent in that basement watching wrestling VHS tapes and that kind of thing. And because of my, nature of me living a couple towns over, from my parents and that kind of thing, all my old wrestling VHS and a bunch of collectibles are still at their house in their basement,
right.
Packed away in rubber tubs.
Yeah.
So I always thought, man, I could have my own, that number 9 right there on Twilight Zone on that list. If I went back to my parents' house and rummaged through all that old stuff,
yeah.
Would really make me hark on the past and that kind of thing. But maybe I'm overanalyzing it just way too much. But I don't know, it's kind of sort of me, myself personally, the way that I see it. I think we all do that.
Absolutely. Everybody does.
We don't so much rely on the past. We just like to think of the best that we could think of it as.
Yeah.
And didn't realize at the time, how carefree you are. You have no bills, no responsibilities, no nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Everything you got back then was gravy. You remember when you mowed you mowed your neighbor's yard and it was like, wow, I got $10 now. Now I could spend it on baseball cards or garbage pail kids or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an excellent episode. So, like I said, that was one of my favorites, probably my number 1. But what are we up to? Number 8.
Here we are, number 8. Second season, 22nd episode, and I'm pretty sure that by the time I say the actual name of the episode, you'll remember it. Long Distance Call.
Oh yeah.
You remember this one?
Oh yeah.
With the grandmother. Yeah.
Yep. That was Bill Mummy. Yeah.
Yes. And the guy gives his kid this toy phone, and the kid keeps talking on the toy phone. And all this bizarre stuff that's coming out of his kid and the abnormal behavior. And finally, by the end of the episode, the father picks up the phone and he realizes that, in fact, he's talking to the dead grandmother.
Yeah.
Because the kid has a brush with death, with the ambulance arriving and everything else.
Yeah, he jumps in the pool.
Yeah. And it was like finally the father smartens up and he tells his mother, which is the grandmother, like, look what you're doing to this kid. And he's my son. He's pretty much telling his own mother to butt out of his business.
Gotta say one thing though, the grandmother, played a great part in the episode, but she was a dick though. I mean, she was making that mother miserable, trying to just exclude her out of her own son's life at every turn. She was a dick, to be honest. She really was.
She was. I would go so far as to use this. I would go so far as to use the C word. She's telling the kid to run out in the middle of traffic and kill himself so he could be with her. Who the hell thinks like that?
Yeah, even like at the party, open mind first. It's like she was just jealous of that wife, I guess, because he married her son or whatever, but loves the kid. But she was one of the worst characters I remember out of this series.
Yeah, and in the end, her comeuppance is, well, you're dead, so just go away. Even if it is his own biological mother, still. And if you remember, it's the same little boy from another episode, which I don't know if I should go into detail about that because, well, for obvious reasons, you'll see.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. I'll wait till you announce it, though.
He
sends a dog to a field, though. That's a hint.
Yeah. Oh, here we are. Number
We're
7.
Up to number 7.
Yeah. The Shelter. What
That's
more could
one.
I possibly say?
That's a bomb
yeah,
shelter.
And it is.
Yeah.
It literally is a literal bomb shelter. And again, I wouldn't say that this is like a throwback to, the previous episode on this list, but you really see just how gritty and disgusting human nature can be.
Right.
People blaming each other, people having to coexist with one another, and just the pure ugliness and greed of humanity is like pretty much exposed when all these people are stuck in a shelter with each other. And
they
announcement
had to break in to get in there. They got that big iron pole, brought it into the house to knock the door down so they could get in there, which didn't make any sense because if you're going to knock the door down, there goes the bomb shelter, right?
Right. But also,
about it.
It just shows what pieces of crap he had for all the people in the neighborhood for them to be invading his property and privacy like that.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Because
but it shows
they didn't set up for the worst, so let's take his.
Yeah, exactly. And for them just pretty much to feel like they're entitled to taking what's his.
Right.
And then, of course, the big reveal is via radio that everything is going back to normal, that it was a false alarm.
False alarm. And
then
you see how the friendships can't be mended.
Yeah. You just see that once that damage has been done, you could never get that trust back.
Yeah, it's over.
Which, yeah, for this, the 7th one on my list, it reflects humanity so much. It's the same damaging thing if you have a very good friend in your life and they have betrayed you, and it's like, or it's so strange because of all the relationships and crap I've been through and 5 ex-wives, I've never had a woman cheat on me. Well, at least to the very best of my knowledge. But I can only imagine something like that would take forever to get trust back in somebody, especially if there's something that heinous has been done. And it's a constant reminder of, in a crisis situation, just the overall greed in humanity and how there's almost no good people when something like that comes out.
Right. Absolutely right.
There's so much of a thought process to me going behind the whole thing is watching how people act toward each other is just like appalling. It's just terrible.
Yeah. It is. That's a great episode too. That's That's one that even now, like with COVID-19, not that people have bomb shelters or anything, but when people are hoarding stuff, and it's kind of still out there.
Oh,
that mentality,
yeah.
You know, so if you think about it, it's just
that to
there.
me. And one of the things I dropped in like my small footnotes, which I gave up on because the writing is so small when I wrote it, that I just kind of like I hit like bullet points, and the rest of it I just fill in. A lot of what happened with wrestling in the mid-'90s, where you only called a couple of things, and the rest of it you just filled in, even if it was on live TV.
Right.
To me, this was one of those things that it's so relatable to the current day and era and the pandemic that we're going through.
Right.
You remember that? When people like at first were like, all the water has gone off the shelves and all the toilet paper and the towels it's so relatable because it's still going on now to a scary degree. All these years later, we're supposed to be evolved as a whole, as humanity. The same issues that plagued us back then still continue to this very day.
Absolutely. That's the point right there for sure.
Yeah,
what are we up to 6?
Oh, 6. And good. I'm glad I dropped it before. Number 6. 3rd season, 8th episode. It's a Good Life.
Oh yeah.
My God, where do you even begin with this one? He is one spoiled little prick.
Yeah,
and you know, the whole time you're watching this 6-year-old little bastard, you're like, what a spoiled, entitled, just what a miserable little kid. And the fact that all these people have to bend over backwards to accommodate him, and you know, you got to think good thoughts, isn't that right,
and
Anthony?
Terrified
like,
of him too.
Yeah, and terrified of him as well. But, you know, I don't like when people talk.
Yeah.
When I'm playing, you know, like, just what a miserable little bastard he is. And by the end of the episode, you realize the reason that he's like this and wishing people out into the cornfield not to come back, and the reason that he's really like this and the reason why he's so miserable is because he realized with all the power in the world in his hands,
still not happy.
That he's still not happy.
Yeah.
And it goes to show you that, you know, if children get what they want from the very get-go, easily relatable to the fact that they'll turn out to be like this.
Yeah. They never did explain, like, why he had that power, though, right?
No, it never actually did.
Came out of nowhere.
I think it was
just had it. I
think it was just an exercise to show that even with all the power in the world and an undeveloped mind, and two, being that this is the 6th on the list, it almost seems like a recurring theme of, you know, you reap what you sow, but with this one, he didn't get his comeuppance. Only the fact that he came to the reality of, you know, I got everything I could want.
Right.
Everything that I want. He's watching dinosaurs battling on TV.
Yeah.
Because that's what he wants to see.
The closest that I would say that it would be for him, you know, him getting his was when they were telling the guy to hit him with the ashtray, but he never did that, though.
Yeah. And the uncle gives him the comeuppance to say, hey, you know, how would you like it? He's like, we are under his duress all the time. Every single time, every hour of the day. We must live to serve him.
Right.
You know, and it's like you come to the reality, and so does the little kid by the end of it, that, you know, given all these powers, there's nothing good that he does with it because he doesn't know good from bad. Are children inherently evil born, or are they made that way because of all the freedom that they're given? Without structuring a child, there's an awful lot that plays into, like, such the human psyche here, or, you know, are children willing to take advantage of given the good things in life? Right. Well, yes, but aren't we all? Yeah. If you were given a chance to take advantage of your given situation, would you do good or would you do bad with it? Well, being that a child is raised this way, he doesn't know right from wrong. He doesn't know good from bad. All he wants to do is stay up late and eat candy like this little bastard.
Yeah, it was a good episode. That's definitely one of my favorites as well. So we're up to the top 5 now.
Yeah. One last thing I got to point out about that. when he turns the uncle into the Jack in the Box.
That's a
and
good
you
scene.
just
I
see
like
the
that
reflection
one, yeah.
and the horror on the woman's face of her looking at the shadow and the thing bouncing back and forth, and this guy on this. Of course, again, it's done with low budget and everything, and it's well documented. The budgeting for the show, but to me, that was just one of the craziest scenes ever. Is watching the Jack in the Box and the spring with the head and the thing bouncing back and forth, and just the shadow alone and the look of horror on their face is just, to me, something like that again is just so priceless to watch. But yeah, to me too, because we were all kids at one point, so we could all relate, and it really makes you think: could you wind up, or could you, end up being this way? But okay, top 5. Here we go. Oh man, Don Carter, William Shatner, Nick of Time.
Oh, that's a great one. Getting the car fixed.
Car trouble.
Yeah.
Car trouble to the diner. Almost gets killed by a car. The wife does. Then we'll step into traffic. It shows you the absolute perils of knowing just way too much about your future. And
also addiction too. Addiction, because he was addicted to getting those readings.
Right. And so for the people out there that are wondering what on this planet we're talking about, in this one, my top 5 of all time is the guy sits down, and it's almost like a jukebox, like a diner, although this thing is, read your fortune. And back then, a penny was pretty much the equivalent of, what would you say, 50 cents, 70 cents, pretty much?
Like 50 cents, yeah. Or a quarter at least,
so
I guess.
He starts like asking this thing just general questions. And as time is progressing, he just starts going more and more and more and more in depth. And he starts asking this thing like deep and serious questions, and the wife herself is watching her husband just about go mad, sticking all this money in this thing and asking all these questions, and then the thing cranks out his fortune. And it's like I threw something out about it. It really, really, really goes to show you the perils of knowing just way too much about your own damn future and about worrying so much about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of the things ring true for this guy, but the crazy thing is that this as well as I do. Either you could tell the end of it, or I'll just rattle it off.
Go ahead.
Okay. As soon as they leave and they go and their car is fixed and everything, you watch another couple come and sit down at the same damn seat that they're sitting in, so it's ready to go all over again with another brand new couple.
And the only thing I'll add to that is that that couple that walked in is older, so I'm guessing that he was trying to say that young people or old people could definitely fall for this addiction or whatever you want to call it. And also, that older couple that came in there, they were serious about those tickets, so they had been there before. That wasn't the first time.
Right.
They went right to it, and they were ready to start asking those questions. So that wasn't the first time they were in there. So it shows you that they were addicted to those answers.
Yeah, but the dark fixation about knowing so much about your future is just beat you over the head in this one. And then for another couple to come in and wind up in the same exact situation was like, oof.
Crazy. It's a great episode. So that was what?
What more can you say about number 4? Eye of the Beholder.
Oh, yeah.
I tried to go for the more...
Make it iconic.
The funny thing is, and I sat there and I watched each and every one of these episodes, and I combed them with a fine-tooth comb, and I just jotted down, like I said, the bullet points. But with Eye of the Beholder, what makes it absolutely fascinating is look at the way it is shot. There's not one single... Like, when it's shot, you don't have the impression that something could be wrong with their faces, right?
Right.
Because of the way that it's shot, the focus is all on this woman, and her face is all bandaged up. And lo and behold, bandages come off, and you're taking a gasp. You're like, she is drop dead gorgeous. And they mention how this is her 8th surgery to conform and look like the rest of society. And then they introduce you to her boyfriend, who's like this, if you say no homo in 2020, that's a bad thing, right? You can't really say that.
He was a good-looking guy. We'll just say it like that. He was a normal, good-looking guy.
I don't think it discredits me if I call this guy was like handsome. He was like a perfect 10 for a dude. Yeah, and you see that's her boyfriend. He comes out of curiosity to come visit his girlfriend who is having this procedure done to her again for the 8th time, for her to conform to society and how societal standards are for the average human being to live. And then, of course, when they finally show the faces of all the people that are working on her to conform to what she looks like, they're all ugly and pig-faced.
Yeah.
And, of course, that is the big reveal, and it makes sense when you go back and watch it and you're seeing how things are shot. You're kicking yourself in the head like, how the hell didn't I notice that? Well, the reason why is because it's kind of like a magician. They distract you to show what's important. Right. What is important is this woman, the bandages on her face, and God, what could she possibly look like? And she's not paying attention to the doctors. You're not paying attention to the nurses. You're not paying attention to the interns. You are, in fact, paying attention to just this woman because she's the focal point of this entire episode. And to me, that's what makes it, is the way that it's shot and overall the entire thing about, I'm sorry, it was actually 11 operational failures before. I don't know why the number 8 got stuck in my mind, but yeah, they clearly show her, the hidden faces, and my God, that chick was so drop dead gorgeous, man. Yeah. Looking at her,
yeah,
they got the perfect actress with this voice that is almost like creepy when you listen to her talk about her problems and about how she can't conform and how this better be the one, this better be the surgery, and the male model looking boyfriend and everything. But easily to me, what Rod Serling is pretty much in your face about with this episode is it's a conformality like lesson. It's all about conforming and about, like it harkens back to the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah, and about I was going to say, the title pretty much says it all, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, and, the whole conformity issue is still, of course, going on to this day and era, although this one, because it's telling you something or teaching you something or there's something you're supposed to take out of this episode, it's pretty in your face about how ridiculous, utterly ridiculous it can be when you actually break down things and you look at it that way.
Right. Definitely. That's one of the classics right there. So now we're up to number 3.
Wow, our top 3. This one was, and it's funny to me when I like I said before, I tried to pick things that were more obscure, but something like this just totally overrides everything, because this was actually in the 5th season and it was a 6th episode. Living Doll, Telly Savalas.
Oh yeah, that's a creepy
one. All right, so he's involved with this woman who has had a daughter from a prior marriage, and he despises the daughter. He can't stand her. She's like this little pain in the ass that's in his way, but he's got a woman that cooks and cleans, and she's the perfect housewife, and she still looks pretty good for a woman that's had a kid. And I could fill in all the blanks here. Feel free to interrupt me anytime you want. Of all people, Jerry Saul was the actual writer for this episode, which, fascinated me because I figured it was like one of Rod Serling's like masterpieces, but you could see where Serling himself put his own spin on this thing. It's also funny too, if you look really close at this, you could see when Telly Savalas is like answering the phone, you could see the camera crew, you could see the shadow in the background.
Right.
You gotta look
for this. I remember seeing that, yeah.
Because it's one of those rare, like, it's one of those rare things that, like, it's a snafu. It's something that shouldn't have been or whatever, but they kind of like overrode it anyway.
Right.
Long story short, as a gift, she's given this doll. And he wants to get rid of this damn thing. He thinks it's ugly. He can't stand to look at it, you know.
Too expensive.
And then, yeah. And then lo and behold, you know, he sees the joy she's getting out of this thing and how she just won't let it go. And the doll starts telling him, I don't like you. I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
And this guy, he ultimately gets his comeuppance because he tries everything. He tries putting a bag over it. He tries throwing the garbage. And the doll just keeps coming back. And then, of course, where his comeuppance, he falls down the damn stairs and, you know, all that good stuff. But feel free to fill in any... Yeah, feel free to fill in any blanks on this one. But
yeah, he pretty much trips over the doll, and then the wife runs down. He's obviously dead, and then the wife hears the doll say the same thing to her. So, like Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, he's proven right at the end that this doll was saying all this stuff to him all along, but it's too late.
And the whole Chatty Cathy thing and him trying to actually murder this doll instead of trying to embrace it and realizing the happiness and joy that it brings a little girl and that kind of thing. And this is some of like Telly Savalas's like earliest work, you know. Savalas himself is absolutely iconic. I remember anytime you'd see somebody in the 70s with a bald head, everybody would be like, Kojak, you know?
Yeah.
He was one of the first people to bring a bald head to, like, the cool thing.
Yeah. Right.
Which, as generations have proven later on, even people with a full head of hair shave their head now.
Yeah. Right. That was definitely a great episode. So now we're down to the last two.
Last two. Number 2, will the real Martian please stand up?
That was a great one, yeah. That was a great one.
Okay.
The footsteps in the snow from the lake.
This one is absolutely tremendous, and I don't even know where to begin. A whole bus full of passengers come into a diner, and they're told about, you know, it's been radioed ahead, how there's been a horrible accident. They're all stuck there, and they realize that there is, in fact, an alien. And again, you start to see the manufacturing descent between all of them, of each of them wondering who the hell is an alien. You know, the alien. There's one amongst us now. 2 state troopers showed up, and you got to see Jack Elam as the crazy old man with the cock eyes.
Oh yeah,
Everybody
thought he was the alien.
Yeah. And from the minute you see him, you're like, this wacky, crazy old man that's talking. He almost sounds like he's drunk the whole time. He's really going at it. It's almost like it's really going out of your way to make you believe he's got to be the alien in this whole thing. And the guy behind the diner, you know, he's a guy, you know, working his shift, running his diner, you know, he's mild-mannered. He doesn't think much, and of course they've run through the entire stereotype of all the people that are involved with it. But to me, Jack Elam completely steals it because he's such a character actor. And everybody hangs on every word that he says because they're like, you know, where did this weirdo even come from? And they start telling each other, you weren't even on the bus. You know, who are you? And I don't remember you. And were you sleeping? And yeah. So the script, the dialogue for this thing is absolutely incredible. But to me, it's the dark paranoia from everybody involved that steals it. Like, everybody there has, like, such a dark paranoia, and, you know, they're all questioning each other. There's newlyweds on the bus, you know, that are at the diner. They're all looking at what each other's eating, and they're like, what the hell kind of, only an alien would eat that, you know?
Right.
And then, of course, the big reveal when they reveal everything's okay, you know, the road is open back up, everybody's leaving. And then, okay, so it's revealed that when they opened up the bridge, that they all died in the bus accident. So it's like, there's only 2 state troopers that you see and the restaurant owner. So it's like, all right, so does that mean the alien's dead? And then, finally, the owner of the diner himself takes off his hat, his cook hat, and it reveals a third eye.
Yeah.
And there you have it. There was your alien all along. The one guy, and to me, the dialogue steals it, because you would never suspect this man to be the alien. It's just, it's mind-blowing is what it is.
And then the other guy that came back, that survived the accident, that was there, he had a third arm. And, one of them was for Mars, one of them was for Venus, and then they talk about, colonies coming, and one's intercepting the other. It was a great episode, though. It was a real swerve at the end.
Yeah, and you're thinking that the guy with the third arm, you're like, oh, it's got to be once the two state troopers come in and let them know that there was a bus accident, everybody that was in this restaurant, this diner, died. You're thinking, does that mean the alien? I remember the very first time I watched it, because when I was watching them for the very first time, years upon years ago, they were right off of TV, and I was just, I couldn't get close enough to the TV set to watch this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the big reveal at the end to me was like the ultimate swerve, and something that to this day is not to reflect on my childhood itself too much, but because I've went back and watched all these, they're so good. But yeah, that one right there is. I mean, I know it's awfully higher on the list than a lot of other people's stuff that they've watched, but this one to me was just masterful. Just for the script and dialogue alone between each of the people, exploiting everybody's paranoia, everybody accusing everybody, and all the wacky characters involved. It literally could have been any of them that was the alien.
Yeah, it was a great episode, and that's also one of my favorites. Just the alien part at the end made it really, just fun to watch. And like you said, just the back and forth. It's a big mystery. It's like a who murdered who kind of mystery from back in the day, just in a different way. But that was a great episode. So now we're at the number one episode that you chose, and I'm gonna make a prediction. You ready? Of which one I think you chose.
Oh no, because you're gonna guess it. You've got to guess it then. You're going to nail it.
Last.
You're going to guess. There it is, number one. Time enough at last.
I had it down to time enough at. I figured you were going to either pick time enough at last or the Invaders for some reason. I thought maybe you might pick.
The Invaders. I don't know, because
that's not that good of an episode. That's a good episode, but it's just basically her hearing noises for the whole half hour, and then it's revealed that the alien craft that landed is from the United States. It's a good one. I wouldn't say that would be the number one episode or anything close to it, though. But yeah, Time Enough at Last is considered one of the best.
I always felt that that Invaders episode to me was a bit too similar to when the rocket ship crashes on this planet, and they're walking through this desert, and you see
the whole episode is them just walking, right?
Yeah, and it's just like, to me, it was just a bit too similar to the Monsters on Maple Street.
Right.
I kind of felt that it was the same kind of template for that. So it made me rule it out. And I know that maybe we should have counted them up, because anybody would have predicted this would have been my favorite at all. But a reason, too, that I think is so overlooked that this is my favorite one is because nobody realizes what, if you look at it, what a selfish little prick Henry Bemis really was.
Oh, yeah.
This was a married man with a job and responsibilities. All he wanted to do was read his damn books and ascertain all this knowledge. And he almost acted like he was just above all these people. And, I just want my books. And of course he closes the bank vault and he goes to walk out, and boom, he's in the Twilight Zone. It's post-apocalyptic. It's post-apocalyptic. And, here he is with all, they show him walking past the grocery store, so he's got all the food that won't expire, set for life. And if anything this episode teaches you is always bring a spare pair of glasses. I guess. Too, also when you look at it, you do realize that this guy, eventually his eyes would have developed a tolerance and maybe would have come around to where he could have read some of the words. But they show inherently, right from the start, how thick his glasses were.
Oh yeah.
And how
Goggles,
even if he wanted to, it would have taken a long damn time before his eyes could have readjusted for him to be able to see this.
Right.
But to me, what makes it so masterful is the fact that, of all things, just how ironic is the wrong word, that, he did have all the time in the world, and, in the end, he got what he wanted. He really did. It's what he asked for everybody to be.
Yeah, I was going to say it's also a lesson of don't count your chickens before they hatch, because like you said, he had everything planned out for years, and then and then one thing derailed everything. So it definitely was a little bit of don't count your chickens before they hatch.
Yeah, and just him almost being like a child in ways, it's just not fair. It's just not fair. It's like,
he was worried only about himself.
Yeah. You see right from the get-go, this guy was uninterested in anything but what he enjoyed out of life.
Right.
And if there's one thing, Burgess Meredith was in he was in at least 3 major Twilight Zone episodes. There was the one where he was given the superhuman strength, and he reverts back to being a helpless little wimp. We're talking about the guy that was Mickey and Rocky.
Yeah.
But of all things, you really get to see in the end, this guy. If you look at the story and you look at how crafted and written it was, how this guy, he wasn't really the best guy. He was a crappy employee. He was a terrible husband. He neglected his wife. Why would you even marry if you were that selfish and just wanted, time to read your silly books?
Right.
It's almost like you could do that in your spare time anyway. Much less on company time, or much less in your own personal life. And they show how the two kind of blended together, because everybody's attitude toward him is like, get your nose out of those books and into reality.
Right. And
for him to be stuck with that ultimate reality for the rest of God only knows how much longer he lived after that, to me, it's the ultimate karma episode of, goes around, comes around. You asked for this, you got it, and now what's happened has happened, and your glasses have shattered. Well, now
too bad.
You have the rest of your life. You have the rest of your life to put up with what you have done, with the railroad track that you have laid, for you to continue your life like this.
Absolutely. Well, I gotta say, that was an excellent list of 15. We could go on all night with some of these other episodes that weren't chosen, but that's a great list right there. Only the other 2 episodes that come to mind that I would have thrown on my list would have been the After Hours, which was the girl who went to the department store, and she went to the 13th floor, whatever it was, and she was really a mannequin. And
we really went into detail about that. She goes up to, and it was like an imaginary floor, and she goes up there and she sold this crack thing, and it was the only thing that they sold on the entire floor. And then, yes, the ultimate reveal at the end is, simply put, she was just a mannequin from the get-go.
When those mannequins start coming to life at the end and start walking off the displays, I love that part of the episode. It was amazing. The other one that I liked that I probably would have put on my list would have.
I would have. I quickly would have. The first time that I saw that, I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, and it scared the ever-loving shit out of me when the mannequins all started moving.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and they all kind of form kind of like a line, like they all kind of like come together.
They weren't just like regular mannequins. They were like mannequins wearing masks and wedding dresses and tuxedos. It was excellently done.
Yeah, each one of them had their own gimmick.
A different outfit.
And it's clear and obvious, because I want to say that took place at the end of the first season, the kind of budgeting that they were working for, because you could see in the latter episodes of the series that they weren't working with that kind of budget anymore. It was obvious that they had cut him back a lot, as in 20,000 feet, the Nightmare 20,000 feet, where it's just so low budget, you could just tell that they were just, You know, they often use stock footage in. I point out to you the stairwell that they reused that footage too. In the one episode, I'm sorry I interrupted you from you going on to the other. There's so many honorable mentions I could have thrown in there. You remember they did the one that was like a total throwback, like it shot in the 1800s, and the guy puts on the helmet, and it's like a time machine.
Yeah, I do
and
remember that.
They showed just like how they film like Charlie Chaplin.
Right.
But they showed that
it was
with
all
him.
fast walking and stuff. Yeah, I do remember that one.
Yes.
That was a good one too. Another one that I would have thrown in there, and I'll end it on this note because I think my Wi-Fi is going to shoot in a minute. It's very low. Is Mirror Image, the woman who's in the bus depot overnight, and then she keeps seeing her double, and then at the end, the guy sees his double running away with his suitcase. This is a creepy episode.
It was beyond creepy, and like I think that is my most watched episode, but it's not like something that's near and dear to my heart. But when she goes up to the front counter and she was, they're like looking at her crazy, and they're like, "Lady, you've already clocked in."
Over and
Your
over.
Bag's
it was a
over
great
there.
episode. Yeah.
And then finally, she sees herself, and to me, if you want to call it horror in the most primitive way, I mean, a lot of sci-fi is developed or wrapped around like a horror element, but that one right there, and seeing that, and the recurring issues, and her just being a complete like wingding. I mean, she was nuts. She was out there, and they made that stare at you in the face. That this woman clearly, clinically had like major issues going on in her head. Because you yourself, the viewer, you're watching this, and you're like, this woman is abnormal. Like, is she nuts? Like, wait, you're like, wait a minute, why is all this crazy stuff happening? And then it dawns on you. It dawned on me early on in that episode, like, this woman, there's something off about her.
Yeah. So
to me, it kind of like, when you see the swerve at the end, you're like, I figured that. There was something along those lines, but and even at a young age when I watched it, first time I watched it, I was like, this woman, something wrong with her, and you can kind of see it in her face that she's not with it the whole time.
Right.
I don't know if you could. I don't know if you got that vibe from her, but I certainly did.
Yeah, she was definitely out there, and she was she definitely had that look. We'll finish on this note. The only other episode that I probably would have had this in my top 5 would have been The Dummy. The Dummy was one of my favorites.
Oh man, they years later on Tales from the Crypt, they redid something like this with Bobcat Goldthwait, and where the dummy is an actual person. And I remember the first time I watched it, I go, that is such a rip-off of that Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah. Where,
you hear him talking to it, and the thing's talking in the case and everything else. The entire thing, and then the thing at the end, manipulates the little girl. You want to run away. You don't like your aunt, do you? That kind of thing right there was like, man, there are people that can relate to that, but then there are other people like, that's awfully. So many of the Twilight Zone episodes were very dark.
Yeah,
that one's one of the ones that just, it's very in your face with how just dark and just, it's really in a dark place. So the whole
there's
way
no
through.
lesson to it. It was just a dark, creepy episode, and it was that's why it was one of the best ones.
Yeah, almost every last one of them though. When you look at those old episodes of the Twilight Zone, so many of them have an underlying like darkness to them and absolute horror.
Yeah,
it's but they're so timeless in the fact that people thought this way, and people wrote stories like this, way back when. This is, we're talking a half of a century ago.
Yeah.
More than that.
More
than a half century
ago. Well, let's say about 60 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and God, they stood the test of time. Because
they have.
You get a guy like me who I was nowhere to be found when any of these episodes aired from 1959 to 1963. And, to be able to, and that's why other fans of Twilight Zone, they relate to each other so much, because it has captured their imagination as well throughout the years, or they went out of their way to find stuff like this that they find fascinating. That in itself fascinates me, other people that are drawn to them. And it's funny because the more that I talk about these episodes, other friends of mine go, oh man, I know you're into Twilight Zone. It's like, yeah, I really am. So it's definitely a bonding point with other people. And it often makes me wonder if these people get together and go to conventions. And I know for a long time, Serling's daughter was a big, big deal in talking about her father and, you know, his personal life and that kind of thing. But be sure to check out, like, when he goes through the wraparound, in so many of them, Serling is seen with a cigarette in hand, almost nonstop.
Yeah.
The point he was like doing open commercials while the show was airing, because you could advertise cigarettes back then.
Right. Yeah. That was one of his famous. He always had the cigarette at the starting point of those episodes. It was very iconic. All right, Tony. This has been an excellent episode. This is one that we had in the works for a while. I'm glad that we were able to squeeze it in before you left for Japan, and I'll leave it at have a safe trip. We'll try and figure out how to do some interviews while you're over there. Maybe while you're in quarantine, you can look into, you know, what kind of program you have on the computers over there, whatever, and we can try and set it up, you know, for every month or whatever. But definitely have a safe trip, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, it's into the great wide open. I really don't know what's going to happen with me, what's going to become of any of this. The things that I'm booked on, I really haven't went into detail about, but I know the one booking will blow people's minds because it's for one of the two major companies overseas, and I haven't said anything to anybody about it, not until now at least. But yeah, it's who really knows? And just follow me on this journey. And no matter what happens, whatever happens, and I'm going to be willing to accept it. I just thank you for your time once again, and, you know, as always, the platform that you provide me to ramble on and on. So,
it's always a pleasure having you on, Tony, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Man, I can't thank you enough for everything once again, over and over again. So,
no problem, Tony. Have a safe trip. Thank you.
I can only hope for the best for myself and you as well in the future, man. It's a new chapter for you, man. So,
absolutely.
Here's
Thanks
to turning the page, man, and many more. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sam. I truly do appreciate you.
No problem.
You've been listening to Reckless Airwaves Radio. Check us out daily at recklessairwavesradio.com for all the latest Reckless interviews, as well as other Reckless shows, including The Rob and Slim Show, Corrigan's Corner, and Straight to the Point with Percy Crawford.
Yeah, we don't want to do anything to scare your children. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.